back to the Daily Grind. Thanks for checking out the channel. Make sure to hit subscribe if you're new and hit thumbs up if you're not a baby back pickle biting bitch boy, cause you know what time it is. It's full time.
MMA.
I've got some bad news and then a lot of good news, full-time family. I'm going to give you the bad news first, so by the time we get out of this video, we're all smiles. Let's get into this. The bad news: Cyborg versus Amanda Nunes, champion versus champion super fight has been canceled. Even though it wasn't ever super official, it was definitely talked about and agreed upon, as Cyborg has stepped in to save UFC 222. But let's start getting into the good news. But I guess we could talk about the Cyborg versus Nunez super fight for a second. Alright, a little bit about the bad news. Cyborg versus Nunez was never officially announced. It was talked about being on UFC 226 as the third champion versus champion super fight. So, I mean, that was almost too many champions on one card anyway. 6 champions on one fucking pay-per-view. It definitely would have been like the Super Bowl of MMA, which would have been cool to see how it worked. But as UFC 222 took a huge hit, the UFC needed another champion, or any champion, to fight on the card, and it's looking like one of the only available champions that's healthy is Cyborg. Now, with that being said, Cyborg will be stepping in to fight in the main event of UFC 222 versus a girl named Yana Kunitskaya, who's coming over from Invicta, for a bantamweight from Invicta. Now that kind of throws up a lot of red flags, especially for Cyborg fans. Where you at, Stamina MC? We got to talk about it for a second. Cyborg has said she didn't want to fight Nunez because she wasn't a huge draw. She wanted to fight a legitimate featherweight. All of these things, why she wasn't going to fight Cyborg or Amanda Nunes, none of those boxes are checked off in this fight. She's fighting a bantamweight. Nobody knows her name. Coming over from Invicta. I mean, so I don't know why Cyborg agreed to take this fight. The only reason I can think of, she's doing a huge favor for the UFC. I'll tell you that much. Cyborg is doing the UFC a huge favor here. Maybe she wants that in her back pocket or something. But I'm just saying, she's not fighting a legitimate featherweight, and she's also not fighting like a big name. So it's just Cyborg, another chick essentially getting sacrificed to Cyborg. And all I gotta say is, for that fight, I really hope Mario Yamasaki, Dan Mergliata, any of these referees that like to let fights go on a little bit too long, I mean, you don't want to see that in this fight. Even though Mrs. Yana Kunitskaya is more experienced than Kashila Prashuera, who just fought Valentina Nurmagomedov, or Valentina Shevchenko, whatever you want to call her, this fight's probably going to be pretty one-sided. It's another chick coming from another organization fighting Cyborg at a weight class up. And so this is kind of like fucking getting sacrificed here. But it is what it is. I mean, she's got a woman on deck. Clearly, this is the way into the UFC for a lot of chicks. Hell, the Invicta bantamweight champion had to fight Cyborg to get into the UFC. That was Tanya Evinger. And this chick actually lost a title fight to Tanya Evinger in Invicta. So now, Cyborg already beat the Invicta champ. Now she's fighting an Invicta challenger. So anything can happen in MMA, but this is essentially a Cyborg show. Now, with that being said, the co-main event has also been saved. Actually, we now have a co-main event for UFC 222. Before, it was Frankie Edgar versus Max Holloway, with the co-main event of Stefan Struve and Andrei Arlovski. Now we've got a title fight in the main event and a legitimate fucking, top contender fight at the co-main event, which is now Frankie Edgar, who was supposed to be fighting Max Holloway. He's staying on the card, helping save the card, and fighting Bryan Ortega, another top contender that's streaking on a 4-fight win streak, I believe, all submissions. Gonna be a hell of a fight, wrestler versus grappler. As far as Bryan Ortega's jiu-jitsu is something serious. Can't wait for that fight, actually. I was gonna say for both of these fights, but I'm not too excited about the Cyborg Kunitskaya fight. I really don't know much about that chick. And I just expect, and she's not even a legitimate featherweight, which is what Cyborg's been asking about. So I don't know why I should be excited about that fight. But the co-main event's going to be dope. And what I'm super excited about, of course, Sean O'Malley versus Andrei Sukumtop on the card. Fucking UFC 222 in Las Vegas has been saved. Now, more good news, even more good news. So since Cyborg versus Amanda Nunes is off, because Cyborg now has another fight, Amanda Nunes has to get a new fight. In UFC 224, we know Cyborg wasn't really wanting to fight Amanda Nunes in Brazil because she needed more champions, or she wanted a bigger card. So even though Brazil would have been a great place for that fight, Cyborg was more making demands of in Vegas on UFC 226. Well, now that Amanda Nunes is freed up, she can actually fight in Brazil, which I'm sure UFC 224 could really use. So the UFC is working on Raquel Pennington versus Amanda Nunes. Raquel Pennington versus Amanda Nunes was already in the works previously. A lot of people didn't know about, because before the UFC could officially announce the fight, Raquel Pennington got into a hunting accident, I believe, and injured her leg. So with that being said, Amanda Nunes versus Raquel Pennington is very likely for UFC 224. Super dope fight. Raquel Pennington is one of the best bantamweights that's not known by a lot of people. She's very super tough, super dope fight. She's probably the only legitimate #1 contender in the division right now. But she had that injury, so she hasn't been able to fight for the title, which is why Amanda Nunes was going to fight Cyborg. There wasn't no serious contenders or legitimate #1 contenders. But since all of this shenanigans is happening, it's looking like Raquel Pennington's going to be healed up in time to fight Amanda Nunes at UFC 224, and I got to say, I fucking love that fight. I like Amanda Nunes versus Raquel Pennington more than I like Cyborg versus Units of Mutakaya. I've never heard of this chick, and I mean, it is what it is, though. She's going to be coming over, getting her opportunity to shine in the UFC, even if it means she's got to get sacrificed to Chris Cyborg first. So with that being said, it is what it is. Let the full-time family know what you think in the comments. I'm out.
Da 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 da. It's the motherfucking DOG.